When Lauren picked up the phone that afternoon, she expected nothing more than a routine check-in with her mother. She had no idea that within minutes, everything she believed about her family, their love, their loyalty, their support, would crumble in a way she could never forgive. The engagement party she had dreamed of for years? Cancelled. The reason? A lie. And the truth beneath it? Far worse than she ever imagined. Lauren's fingers tightened around her phone as she stepped away from her desk, weaving through the office until she found a quiet corner near the windows. Outside, the Boston skyline stretched endlessly, but her world had just closed in. "What do you mean you canceled the reservation?" She tried to keep her voice steady, but the words came out sharper than she intended. "Sweetheart, your father and I discussed it, and we just don't think the Riverside Terrace is a practical choice." Her mother's voice carried that smooth, controlled tone Lauren knew too well, the one she used when delivering bad news as if it were a favor. "The invitations already went out. The event is in 4 days. Do you realize what you're saying?" "We do, and we think this is for the best. The venue is simply too extravagant. We can't justify spending that much on a party." Lauren felt something hot rise in her chest. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, something sharp-edged and painful. "We put down a deposit. You agreed to this months ago. How much could you possibly be saving by canceling at the last minute?" A pause, a fraction of a second too long. "It's not just about the money, Lauren," her mother said finally carefully. "It's about setting reasonable expectations for your future. With Ethan's background, perhaps it's best to keep things modest." The words hit harder than any slap. Lauren's mind went blank for a moment. Then the meaning slammed into her. This wasn't about money. It was never about money. It was about Ethan. They had canceled her engagement party because they were embarrassed by the man she was marrying. Her stomach twisted, her grip on her phone uncomfortably tight. "You're telling me you canceled my engagement party because Ethan isn't rich enough for you? Don't be dramatic, dear," her mother sighed, as if Lauren were being unreasonable. "We just think it would be wise to keep things in perspective. Marriage is about building a future together, and Ethan comes from a different world than you do." A different world. Lauren shut her eyes for a moment, willing herself to stay calm. "Ethan is a senior software engineer at one of the most competitive firms in the country. He built himself from nothing. He's successful, hardworking, and brilliant. And yet, he still drives that old car of his, doesn't he?" Lauren's breath caught in her throat. "I cannot believe what I'm hearing," she whispered. "We're only looking out for you," her mother pressed on, gentle in that way that made it all the more infuriating. "Marriage is a lifetime commitment. You want to be sure before you make a mistake. There's no harm in a long engagement." "You're hoping I'll change my mind," Lauren said flatly. "We just think you should be realistic, sweetheart. You've always had high expectations, and we want to make sure you're not settling." Settling. That was what they thought of Ethan. Lauren didn't trust herself to speak. She could feel the rage boiling under her skin, but more than that, she felt something break. Her mother took her silence as an opportunity to move the conversation along. "Now, I've already started looking at some charming restaurant venues." Lauren hung up. Her hands were shaking. She wasn't sure if it was from anger or heartbreak. A message popped up on her phone. It was from her sister, Natalie. "Mom just told me about Riverside. So sorry. But silver lining. She's upgrading my birthday venue to make up for the family embarrassment. Isn't that great?" Lauren read it once, then twice. Her fingers curled around her phone. They hadn't canceled because of money. They had canceled because they were ashamed. Ashamed of Ethan. Ashamed of her. And the worst part? They hadn't even tried to hide it. Because in their world, wealth mattered more than love. Connections mattered more than character. Status mattered more than family. And now Lauren knew exactly where she stood. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. Then she grabbed her coat. It was time to go home. And this time she wasn't walking in as their daughter. She was walking in as someone they had underestimated. Lauren stood in front of the grand entrance of her parents' estate, her childhood home that had never quite felt like hers. The towering white columns, the pristine garden meticulously maintained for the sole purpose of impressing guests, the massive oak doors that had always seemed more like a barricade than a welcome. Everything about this place screamed of control. But tonight, she wasn't here as the obedient daughter they expected. She was here to confront the people who had gone out of their way to humiliate her and dismiss the man she loved. She pushed open the door without knocking, stepping into the marble-floored foyer. The distant hum of conversation and the clinking of crystal glasses drifted from the dining room. A familiar, carefully orchestrated evening was unfolding, where every guest was hand-selected, every conversation curated for maximum social advantage. It made her sick. She found them in the sunroom, gathered around an elegant dining table covered with catering samples, floral arrangements, and seating charts. At the head of it all sat her mother, Vivian, directing staff with the ease of someone who had been planning high-profile events her entire life. Her father, Henry, stood nearby, nodding in approval at the selections. Natalie, her younger sister, lounged at the far end of the table, sipping a glass of wine and looking as if she were barely paying attention. Lauren's presence didn't go unnoticed for long. "Lauren," her mother said, startled, before quickly recovering. "We weren't expecting you." Lauren's gaze flicked to the table, the beautifully arranged seating cards, the sleek invitation designs that bore a painfully familiar name, Riverside Terrace. She let the silence stretch, making them sweat. Then, in a voice eerily calm, she asked, "What is this?" Her father sighed, already irritated. "It's your sister's birthday celebration. We're finalizing the details." "At the venue you canceled my engagement party at," Lauren said, her voice cutting through the polished air of the room. A thick silence settled. Natalie, for once, looked uncomfortable. Her father straightened his shoulders, adjusting the cuffs of his expensive tailored suit. Vivian smoothed a napkin on the table before carefully choosing her words. "We already had a relationship with the venue, and when the space became available, it only made sense to use it for an event that was worthy of it," Lauren finished for her. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." Natalie let out a heavy sigh. "Lauren, I told Mom it was too soon after your situation, but she insisted the venue was too perfect to pass up." Lauren turned to her mother. "Why couldn't my celebration be perfect?" Vivian's expression didn't change. "Because, darling, your guest list is different. Your father and I need to be mindful of the company we keep." There it was. The truth laid bare. Lauren had expected to feel rage, but what settled over her instead was a cold certainty. She had spent years hoping that, despite their flaws, her parents still respected her choices, still wanted her happiness. But they didn't. They never had. "You mean Ethan isn't the company you want to keep?" she said flatly. Her father, always one to cut through pretense, finally spoke. "He doesn't belong in our world, Lauren. You know that. One day you'll understand." The finality in his voice made something inside her snap. She should have left then, should have walked away and never looked back. But there was one last thing she needed to know. She turned to Natalie. "Did you know?" Natalie hesitated, her fingers tightening around the stem of her wine glass. "I didn't cancel your party, Lauren, and I didn't invite Logan." A sharp chill ran down Lauren's spine. "Logan Monroe?" Her mother's expression didn't flicker, but her father's silence said everything. The betrayal deepened. Logan Monroe was the man her parents had always wanted her to marry, the son of a banking dynasty, the type of man who would fit seamlessly into their world. She had dated him briefly years ago before realizing that, beneath his charm, he was as hollow as the society they moved in. Now, standing in front of her parents, it was all so clear. This wasn't just about canceling her engagement party. It was about reintroducing Logan into her life, about steering her back onto the path they had always intended for her. Lauren let out a slow breath. "And Ethan?" Her mother finally looked at her. "He wasn't invited." Of course, he wasn't. Lauren took a step back, something shifting deep inside her. The weight of years of expectations, of manipulation disguised as love, of quiet disappointments and carefully worded criticisms. It all came crashing down in that moment. "Understood," she said, her voice steady. "And I want you to understand something too. I won't be manipulated. Not by you. Not by this family. And certainly not by Logan Monroe." She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving them sitting in their perfect sunroom with their perfect table arrangements and their perfect lies. By the time she reached her apartment, her anger had settled into something sharper. Plan. Ethan was sitting on the couch, reading, but the moment he saw her face, he set the book aside. "What happened?" Lauren sat beside him, gripping his hands tightly. "They didn't just cancel the party. They're trying to push me back to Logan. They think you're a phase, and they're just waiting for me to come to my senses." Ethan exhaled, a sad smile forming. "I'm not surprised." She looked at him, eyes blazing. "I don't care what they think. We're hosting our own engagement party." Ethan hesitated. "Lauren, no. We don't need their approval. We don't need their venue. We need people who love us. That's it." A slow smile spread across his face. "Okay. Where?" "The rooftop at Mill Creek Brewery," she said, already pulling out her phone. "It's modern, elegant, and most importantly, it's ours." She spent the next few hours sending out digital invitations, making arrangements, and rallying friends who had been just as disgusted by her parents' behavior as she was. And as she worked, the weight of her family's rejection began to feel lighter. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from Natalie. "Mom invited the Hendersons to my party, and she told Brad it was canceled. She didn't even send him an invitation." Lauren stared at the screen, her stomach tightening. Brad was Natalie's boyfriend. Her parents had done to her sister exactly what they had done to her, deciding that the man she loved wasn't good enough and trying to engineer something better. She called Natalie. "Come to our party," she said the moment she picked up. "Bring Brad. Celebrate with us." A long silence. Then softly, "I can't, Lauren. Dad's announcing my promotion that night. If I walk away, I lose everything I worked for." Lauren's grip on her phone tightened. "So you'll let them control you forever?" Another silence. Then a whisper. "Not all of us can afford to burn bridges, Lauren." Lauren exhaled, feeling the last pieces of hope fall away. "I guess I was wrong about you." She hung up. Ethan touched her arm gently. "Are you okay?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I will be. Before we continue the story, I want to connect with you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop the flag of your country in the comments below. And get ready because this is far from over." The night of Natalie's birthday arrived, bringing with it a storm of emotions Lauren had spent all day trying to control. She and Ethan had gone back and forth about whether attending was worth it, whether walking into that room full of people who had already judged them was the right decision. But in the end, it wasn't about them anymore. It was about standing their ground. It was about proving that no one, not her parents, not their high society circle, and certainly not Logan Monroe, could decide who she was supposed to be. The Riverside Terrace was even grander than Lauren remembered. The crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the room. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the skyline beyond, and everything from the delicate floral centerpieces to the elegantly printed place cards screamed perfection. Her mother's signature touch. Lauren had expected the room to fall silent when she and Ethan entered, but the reaction was far more subtle. Conversations softened, eyes flicked toward them before quickly looking away, the kind of polite dismissal that spoke louder than any confrontation. They weren't surprised to see her, but they had already decided she was irrelevant. Her mother was the first to greet her, stepping forward with that same gracious smile she reserved for social events. "Lauren, I didn't realize you would be joining us tonight." Lauren smiled, matching her tone. "It's my sister's birthday. Why wouldn't I be here?" Vivian's gaze flicked briefly to Ethan, then back to Lauren. "Of course, but please, let's not cause a scene. This evening is about Natalie." "Don't worry," Lauren said smoothly. "I wouldn't dream of taking the attention away from her." Her father joined them then, offering a stiff nod to Ethan before turning to Lauren. "I hope you're being reasonable about everything. If by reasonable, you mean that Ethan and I are celebrating our engagement without your approval, then yes, Lauren said, her voice steady. Her father sighed. Lauren, we've been patient with you, but this rebellion of yours doesn't change reality. One day, you'll understand that we were trying to help you. She didn't bother responding. There was no point. Before anyone could say more, a deep, authoritative voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. Lauren Carter, I was hoping to see you tonight. She turned toward the voice, and the air in her lungs froze. Robert Marshall, CEO of one of the most powerful tech firms in the country. A man whose mere presence in a room could shift power dynamics in an instant. And right now, all of his attention was on her. Her parents straightened immediately, her father stepping forward with his best businesslike expression. Robert, a pleasure as always. But Robert barely acknowledged him. His focus was entirely on Ethan. My team has been trying to reach you, Robert said, extending his hand toward Ethan. I heard your company has something that's about to shake up the industry. Ethan shook his hand, calm as ever. We finalized the deal this week. Lauren didn't miss the way her father stiffened at those words. Robert's gaze flicked toward her parents, and a knowing smile touched his lips. I assume you two already knew that Lauren's fiancé was about to become one of the most sought-after names in tech? Her mother's practiced expression faltered for the briefest moment. Her father, however, recovered quickly. Of course, we've always believed Ethan had potential. Lauren felt something shift then, something profound and deeply satisfying. The same people who had dismissed Ethan as unworthy were now scrambling to rewrite the narrative. And they weren't the only ones. The shift in the room was undeniable. Conversations that had previously excluded them suddenly became opportunities to introduce themselves. The same people who had ignored Ethan moments ago now wanted to know about his work, his future, his plans. Lauren saw Logan Monroe watching from across the room, his expression unreadable. He had been the family's perfect candidate, the man her parents had carefully positioned in her life. But now, standing in the middle of their world, it was Ethan who held all the power. And her parents knew it. Her father turned back to Ethan, his voice carefully measured. I think we should sit down soon. There may be business opportunities to discuss. Ethan met his gaze without hesitation. I appreciate the offer, but I'm selective about partnerships. Vivian stepped in smoothly. Surely we can find a way to move forward. Now that things have settled, perhaps we could host a formal engagement party for you two. A proper one with the right people. Lauren let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. You don't get to rewrite history. Her mother stiffened. Lauren, we're trying to make this right. No, you're trying to control the outcome. You didn't support us when it mattered. You didn't believe in Ethan when it mattered. And now that you realize what you lost, you're scrambling to fix it. Henry exhaled sharply. Lauren, think about what you're throwing away. She turned to Ethan, taking his hand in hers. I already have. And for the first time, I'm making the right choice. She met her parents' eyes one last time. I'm done chasing your approval. Then she turned and walked out of the Riverside Terrace, not as a defeated daughter, but as a woman who had finally, truly won. The Riverside Terrace faded behind Lauren with every determined step she took. The cold night air wrapped around her, but it was nothing compared to the ice she had just left in that room. For the first time in her life, she wasn't walking away in defeat. She was walking away with power, with clarity, with the unshakable knowledge that she no longer needed their approval. Ethan walked beside her in silence, letting her process everything. It wasn't until they reached the car that he finally spoke. You okay? She exhaled, a slow breath that carried years of expectations, disappointment, and pressure. Better than I thought I'd be. And she meant it. Inside that ballroom, her parents had lost something far more valuable than they could comprehend. They had lost their grip on her. They had lost their ability to dictate her choices. They had lost the daughter they thought they could mold into their perfect image. But she hadn't lost a thing. The life they wanted for her had never been hers to begin with. She had spent years trying to prove to them that she was strong enough to stand on her own. But in reality, She had never needed to prove anything at all. She had already built something real, something lasting, something worth fighting for. And now they had to live with the consequences of their judgment. The next morning, as she sipped her coffee on their small balcony, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Missed calls, messages. Even Natalie had reached out, though Lauren didn't bother reading what she had to say. Ethan glanced at her over the rim of his coffee cup. Are you going to call them back? She shook her head. Not today. Maybe not ever. Ethan smiled, reaching for her hand. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. And that was all that mattered. This story isn't just about family expectations or social status. It's about knowing your worth. It's about choosing love over appearances, about standing firm in the face of those who try to control your path. It's about understanding that the approval of others means nothing if it comes at the cost of your happiness. Now, I want to hear from you. Did Lauren make the right decision? Drop a 2 in the comments if you think she did, or a 7 if you think she should have given her parents another chance. And if this story resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Mr.HeartVibes for more stories that challenge, inspire, and entertain. Let's keep the conversation going.